rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Listen, today is a Memorial Day tribute to honor the fallen. That is what Memorial Day is about. I've been told, listen, Carl, this isn't about veterans. This isn't about first responders. We love all of these people that have served and continue to serve to keep us safe. But today is about the fallen, those that sacrifice their lives in order that we might live. And served in many of these wars throughout U.S. history that I think are just fascinating. I'm starting to learn more and more about some of the history involved in the Civil War, involved in the World War I, World War II, Revolutionary War. Just so many heroes that made this country come together to be what it is today. Obviously, the left is trying to destroy it, but that's not going to change for me giving you some of the information that I think is just cool. And again, I had a caller call into the radio show when I was standing in for Larry Elder, and she said, Carl, I wish we would stop saying Happy Memorial Day and bring the reverence and respect. And I'm paraphrasing that this holiday deserves, for our fallen soldiers. I wish that we would call it a grateful Memorial Day. And I've taken that to heart. Obviously, it doesn't flow off the tongue as smoothly, but nonetheless, I think it works. And I think it's really important. First off, let me do this. I was doing some research, and I didn't know the history of Memorial Day. So I just want to share a few of those things that I've learned. And then I want to talk about, James Carafano of the Heritage Foundation, years ago, he wrote a column just breaking down some of the things that our World War I and World War II troops endured. I'll go through that. I want to do something that's a little, as far as the Civil War is concerned, I want to talk about some of the Black heroes of the Civil War, some that I understand didn't necessarily die during the war. Some may have died soon thereafter, but I still think it's important to memorialize them. The reason why I'm doing that is simply because I feel like if more Americans knew about the heroes of the Civil War that happened to be Black, I feel like there would be more unity in the country. This is important information, and I don't want to neglect any of the Civil War heroes. There's 620,000 estimated troops that died between both sides, Union and Confederate. Obviously, there's so many war stories that I will never know. But one of the things that I've decided to do after looking into some of this is to just start diving into this history deeper. America is such a wonderful place, and because of the sacrifice of the fallen, we're spoiled today. We're spoiled. We don't have to fight all these big wars like they fought in order to make this country come together. So let me just start off here, and then I want to talk about Pat Tillman. Just to you guys might be familiar, or you may not be familiar with Pat Tillman. So we'll cap it off with that. But so let's talk about this real quick. So from history.com, I found something called 9 Things You May Not Know About Memorial Day. I don't have time, or I'm not going to go through every single one of them. Just because it's really extensive, but I do want to go through a few of them because I just think it's cool. And some of you might know this stuff, some of you may not, but I just want to go ahead and go through it. Memorial Day and its traditions may have ancient roots. This from history.com. While the first commemorative Memorial Day events weren't held in the U.S. until the late 19th century, the practice of honoring those who have fallen in battle dates back thousands of years. The ancient Greeks and Romans held annual days of remembrance for loved ones, including soldiers, each year, festooning their graves with flowers and holding public festivals and feast in their honor. These guys are worthy of honor. You may not agree with all wars and battles, but this is how This is how the world was made. It's how it was crafted. It's how boundary lines was set. We get to sit here as Americans today, and we can look back in history. Oh, that was so evil. That was so cruel. But man, this is the way societies were built. And we just get to live in the blessings of those that went before us, not just in America, but throughout world history. In Athens, public funerals for fallen soldiers were held after each battle, with the remains of the dead on display for public mourning before a funeral procession took them to their interment in the Keramikos. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. One of the city's most prestigious cemeteries. One of the first known public tributes to war dead was in 431 BC, when the Athenian general and statesman Pericles delivered a funeral oration praising the sacrifice and valor of those killed in the Peloponnesian War, a speech that some have compared in tone to Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. One of the earliest commemorations was organized by recently freed African Americans. Now, at that time, I don't like using those terms, African American, but at the time, it feels like that's right. Obviously, former slaves that were recently freed. So this is just interesting stuff that I wish this stuff was taught in schools. This is the stuff that I never learned growing up in the LA Unified School District. And it's frustrating to me because I do believe that if more minorities and whites as well were taught how we came together, despite the fact that America has its flaws, how we came together. And some of these stories of these war heroes that happen to be black, white, and united in order to in order to try to build on the foundations that our founding fathers set. The idea of America is such a great idea, regardless of what you feel about, how things came together. It's such a great idea. And the fact that men and women came together to make this country what it is today, our fallen heroes, it's just amazing to me. This stuff is fascinating. So as the Civil War neared its end, thousands of Union soldiers held as prisoners of war were herded into a series of quickly assembled camps in Charleston, South Carolina. Conditions at one camp, former racetrack near the city citadel, were so bad that more than 250 prisoners died from disease or exposure, and they were buried in a mass grave behind the track's grandstand. We're talking about freed slaves, all right? But 3 weeks after the Confederate surrender, an unusual procession entered the former camp. This was on May 1st of 1865. More than 1,000 people recently freed from enslavement, accompanied by regiments of the U.S. colored troops, including the Massachusetts 54th Infantry. I'm going to be studying that later. And a handful of white Charlestonians gathered in the camp to consecrate a new and proper burial site for the Union dead. The group sang hymns, they gave readings, and distributed flowers around the cemetery, which they dedicated to, quote, martyrs of the race course, quote, close quote. So the Holidays founder, had a long and distinguished career. In May 1868, General John A. Logan, the commander-in-chief of the Union Veterans Group known as the Grand Army of the Republic, issued a decree that made May 30th that said May 30th should become a nationwide day of commemoration for the more than 620,000 soldiers killed in the recently ended Civil War. On Decoration Day, as Logan dubbed it at the time, Americans should lay flowers and decorate the graves of the war dead, and I quote, whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land, close quote. According to legend, Logan chose May 30th because it was a rare day that didn't fall on the anniversary of a Civil War battle, though some historians believe the date was selected to ensure that flowers across the country would be in full bloom. Makes sense. After the war, Logan, who had served as a U.S. congressman before resigning to rejoin the Army, returned to his political career, eventually serving in both the House and Senate. And he was the unsuccessful Republican candidate for VP in 1884. When he died 2 years later, Logan's body lay in state in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol, making him one of just 33 people to have received the honor. There's more today that have done it, but there's more here. But I think I'm gonna. Oh, I do want you to know this. Memorial Day didn't become a federal holiday until 1971. Many of you probably knew that. I got to admit that I was ignorant on this stuff. So it's always cool to me to learn stuff about American history. I'm not going to pretend that I'm a know-it-all. I'm just not. I'm not God. I'm not omniscient, right? So I don't know everything. So learning this stuff, it's just so fun and so cool to me. I know the left is trying to tear this country down, and I feel like these our fallen heroes fought and died to make this country what it is, and the great place that every person, regardless of skin color today, can thrive inside of the United States. And we need to honor that. And so I want to be grateful. I'm grateful for those that were willing to sacrifice the ultimate sacrifice so that we could live in the freedoms we do today. Now, Memorial Day didn't become a federal holiday until 1971, and I'll leave it here as after I go through this, and we'll move on to some of the Civil War stuff. The Civil War fascinates me, and I'm going to begin reading more and more on that and sharing more and more with you as I learn more. But it's always fascinated me. I know people will argue it was for business purposes. It was for ending slavery. I think it's more complicated. I think it's a bit of both. And ultimately, it was a war that needed to be fought in order for the Constitution as a whole to come to fruition for everyone in the United States of America. So for us to go back and contextualize history in or try to fit history, American history, into our day and age, it's just really immature of a lot of people. But now, going back to this, Americans embraced the notion of Decoration Day immediately. Remember, it was called Decoration Day initially. That first year, more than 27 states held some sort of ceremony with more than 5,000 people in attendance at a ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. By 1890, every former state of the Union had adopted it as an official holiday, but for more than 50 years, the holiday was used to commemorate those killed just in the Civil War. All right. So not in any other American conflict. It wasn't until America's entry into World War I that the tradition was expanded to include those killed in all wars, and Memorial Day was not officially recognized nationwide until the 1970s when America was deeply embroiled in the Vietnam War. So for the sake of time, I'm going to move on here. I want to share with you a couple of heroes in the Civil War, some black heroes, and not because I'm one of these people. I just believe in Americans, right? I believe there's I don't care if you're white, black, Latino, Asian. If you're an American, you're an American. But this is history that we were not taught about, and I just wish that more blacks and whites alike were taught about these Civil War heroes that happen to be black. We don't share these stories, and they're just absolutely amazing, and they're fascinating because blacks aren't enslaved today, obviously, like we were then, or like our ancestors were, and they felt like this country was worth fighting for. Sure, some just wanted to fight for their freedom, but there were plenty that thought, listen, if this Constitution thing was real for us, this would be better than anything we ever received, any freedoms that we ever had in our own native land. And that's why to this day, you will hear me often say there are no blacks going back to Africa. It doesn't happen. I know some blacks say, oh, well, we'll go back to Ghana. But overwhelmingly, that's not happening, right? Because this is the best place in the world for blacks to thrive. And then if they go to places, if blacks or any one minority that hates America goes to a place where they become expats, isn't it amazing that they always go to places that act like America? It's so funny to me. So that proves how great America is. Let me share this. Harriet Tubman, you guys may know, that Harriet Tubman was a spy and military leader, or perhaps you don't, but she was best known for her courage and acumen as a conductor, according to History.com, on the Underground Railroad. She led hundreds of enslaved men, women, and children north to freedom through its carefully prescribed routes and network of safe houses. But Carl, what does this have to do with Memorial Day? She wasn't a soldier, right? Listen to this. But once the Civil War started in 1861, Tubman used her skills as a spy and expedition leader for the Union Army. This is good information. This is good stuff. In 1862, she traveled to a Union camp in South Carolina to help formerly enslaved people who had taken refuge with Union troops and to work as a cook and a nurse. But despite being unable to read herself, Tubman gathered intelligence for the Union Army, organizing scouts to map territories and waterways and pinpoint the location of Confederate troops and ordnance. This is just fascinating stuff. This is so cool. In 1863, she became the first and only woman to lead a military expedition during the Civil War to resounding success. Tubman led 150 soldiers on 3 federal gunboats. Excuse me. On I'm still getting over whatever this is. Federal gunboats of South Carolina's Combahee River for a surprise attack on the plantations of prominent secessionists. Using intelligence she gathered from enslaved people to bypass hidden Confederate torpedoes along the route, they stopped at several spots to rescue more than 700 enslaved people. Between enabling such a massive escape and burning and pillaging plantations, Tubman's expedition dealt a major military and psychological blow to the Confederacy. About 100 of the black men rescued that day joined the Union Army. Man, that is so fascinating. That is real cool stuff. All right, here's another hero. Excuse me for just a sec as I take a swig. Have you guys ever heard of Alexander Augusta? Neither have I. So Alexander Augusta, he was a pioneering war doctor. He too was black. It says here, with discrimination blocking his dreams of becoming a doctor in the U.S., Alexander Augusta moved to Canada to earn his medical degree before returning to serve as the Union Army's highest ranking black officer during the Civil War. Born to free American parents, Augusta worked as a barber in Baltimore while pursuing a medical education. Denied entry into the University of Pennsylvania, he studied privately with a faculty member until he married and moved to Toronto, Canada, to obtain a degree from the University of Toronto in 1856. He then became head of the Toronto City Hospital. Man, that is so cool. A supporter of the American anti-slavery movement, he returned to Baltimore at the beginning of the Civil War in 1861 and wrote to President Abraham Lincoln offering his services as a surgeon. This guy has a free life in Canada. He returns to America to offer his services. He received a major's commission as head surgeon in the 7th U.S. Colored Infantry, the Army's first African-American physician out of 8 in the Union Army. Have you ever heard this information? Have you ever heard it? I've not heard it. That's for sure. Never heard this stuff. This is so fascinating. Again, the Army's first African-American physician out of 8 in the Union Army and its highest ranking African-American officer. His rank did not shield him from racism. He was physically attacked in Baltimore for wearing his officer's uniform. Complaints from white subordinates led Lincoln to transfer him to run the local Freedmen's Hospital in 1863. After the war, he practiced medicine and became the first black medical professor and one of the original faculty members of the new medical college at Howard University, where he stayed until 1877. The American Medical Association denied him, sadly, recognition as a physician, but he encouraged young black medical students to persevere in their dreams as he did. When he died in 1890, he was the first black officer to be buried in the Arlington National Cemetery. I've got to go see that grave. Here's another one. Abraham Galloway. You ever heard of him? No worries. Neither did I. another black soldier, spy, and state senator. 3 years after escaping slavery in the cargo hold of a ship heading north, Abraham Galloway returned south to free more enslaved people, including a brazen incursion to free his mother. Fearless, fiery, and tireless in his quest to better the lives of African Americans, it turned out Galloway was just the kind of master spy the Union forces needed. Galloway posed as a slave to gather intelligence from Confederate troops. He set up a spy network in parts of the South and encouraged thousands of enslaved men who had sought protection behind Union lines to take up arms to gain their freedom. He helped raise 3 regiments of United States colored troops. Never heard of him. Abraham Galloway, but you're hearing about him today. God, I mean, I will never, I'll be honest with you guys. I have taken it for granted. I try to honor the fallen every year, but learning this history is so important. It's vital. It's vital. America is worth saving. It's worth fighting for, and plenty of people did that. Fallen soldiers. Galloway posed as a slave. Man, could you imagine that? Can you imagine that? You're a freed man, but you want to fight in this war. You want to help free people that look like you. So Galloway posed as a slave to gather intelligence from Confederate troops. He set up a spy network in parts of the South, again, and encouraged thousands of enslaved men who had sought protection to take up arms. That is so fascinating. So fascinating. He never learned to read, but used his powerful oratory and organized skills to fight for black people's rights and citizens. Galloway was part of a delegation of 5 Southern black leaders to the White House to demand that Lincoln support black civil rights. He organized state and local chapters of the National Equal Rights League, and in September of 1865, he helped to lead a Freed People's Convention. In 1868, he became one of the first black men elected to the North Carolina legislature, and he fighting violent voter suppression by the KKK, the Democrat KKK. That was, you guys might not know that, but Democrats formed the KKK in order to fight against black and white Republicans alike, terrorize them. Galloway, who faced numerous assassination threats, always had pistols at his waist and led an armed black militia in Wilmington to counter the constant intimidation. He and 2 other black men won election as state senators, while 18 black men became representatives in the North Carolina General Assembly of 1868 to 1869. During his tenure, Galloway voted for the 14th and 15th Amendments. Man, granting citizenship and suffrage rights to black men so that we could vote. Absolutely amazing. Now there's Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, he was an abolitionist pushing for black recruitment. And obviously we've heard of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, but we had not heard of these other gentlemen. And this is just important, good stuff here. By the time the Civil War began in 1861, Frederick Douglass was one of the most famous black men in the U.S., a prominent voice for freedom, human rights, and social reform, an exceptional orator and writer of whose autobiographies that detailed his slavery and escape became bestsellers at the time. Unbelievable. Douglass was a national abolitionist leader who, for some 20 years, had the ear of the country's leaders. Early in the Civil War, Douglass clashed with President Abraham Lincoln, for not allowing formerly enslaved people to enlist. Lincoln had been reluctant to arm black men and allow them to serve in the Union military forces, in part due to racism and also for fear that outraged border states would join the secession, ensuring the Union's loss. And listen, guys, we have to look at this stuff in the context of history, right? They had to win this war. The Union had to win this war. But as Union defeats mounted and manpower dwindled, black men formed units of their own in the South in 1862. An official call to arms to black men came in early 1863. Douglass, with other prominent abolitionists, helped recruit black soldiers for the Union. He traveled thousands of miles to recruitment meetings, lauding the benefits of service and ending many of his speeches by leading the audience in, quote, John Brown's body, close quote. That was a popular Union Army song he published frequently on the topic in his newspaper, Douglas Monthly. Wow. With articles and broadsides like, quote, Men of Color to Arms, close quote, and, quote, Why should a colored man enlist, close quote. Two of his sons, Charles and Lewis, were among the first to enlist in the famed 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment. Never heard of it. This is so frustrating. The 2nd African American Battalion that saw extensive service in the war, commanded by white officers. A third son, Frederick Jr., was recruited for the regiment like his father. For Douglas, wearing a uniform of a soldier carried great symbolism of a man's worthiness for freedom and a full slate of civil rights. Quote, an eagle on his button and a musket on his shoulder and his bullets in his pockets, close quote. Douglas said. Also, he said, quote, there is no power on earth which can deny that he has earned the right of citizenship in the United States, close quote. And then there's Robert Smalls, I'm sorry. He was a sailor turned senator. I'll make this the last one, and then I want to move on to some of the things that World War I and World War II vets had to endure as they fought for our freedom, our fallen heroes. Robert Smalls' daring escape from slavery into the hands of the Union Navy put him on a path to become the public face and prominent recruiter of black sailors for the Union. He himself would parlay that into a successful political career. Raised in slavery in South Carolina, the son of an unknown white man. Wow. Smalls gained experience as a rigger and a sailor after his owners moved from Beaufort to the larger port city of Charleston, where he married Hannah Jones, an enslaved hotel maid. When his attempts to buy his wife and family out of slavery failed, he plotted an escape. As the Civil War broke out, he became a deckhand on the Confederate supply ship, the Planter, oh my God, and learned how to navigate between ports before dawn on May 13th of 1862. As white officers and the crew slept, he slipped the Planter out of Charleston Harbor with 8 men, 5 women, and 3 children on board, chugging quietly from slavery toward freedom. Ready to blow up the ship if caught, Smalls gave the right signals to pass 5 checkpoints, including Fort Sumter, and once in open waters, raised a white bed sheet in surrender to the Union Navy blockade. He handed over the craft's guns and ammunition, as well as documents detailing Confederate shipping routes. Oh my God. Departure schedules and mine locations. The daring escape helped encourage President Lincoln to authorize free blacks to serve in the military. Congress awarded $1,500. Oh my God, that was a lot of money back then to Smalls, who went on a speaking tour recruiting black men to serve. He also conducted 17 missions on the Planter and the ironclad USS Keokuk in and around Charleston. Once commissioned as a brigadier general in South Carolina militia, he ran a variety of businesses before launching into politics as a member of both South Carolina's House of Representatives and its state Senate. His term in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1874 to 79 was marred when he was convicted of taking a $5,000 bribe while in the state Senate. Sentenced to 3 years in prison, he was pardoned before serving any time. All right, now there's more, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. Let me just read you a bit of a piece from James Carafano of the Heritage Foundation. I won't read the entire column, but I just want you to understand what our fallen had to endure, both in World War I and World War II, and just give you a visual, if I can, of what transpired. And again, what our troops endured, our fallen heroes. And James Carafano, I'm sorry. You can find him on Twitter at JJ Carafano. And he wrote this. And again, I won't go through the entire column, but he just puts a vivid picture, a vivid visual picture in my mind, or he did in my mind. And I hope that I will be able to convey it in such a way in which it does the same for you. Obviously, World War II, are the veterans and those that died, the fallen. Let's just talk about the fallen. They're considered the greatest generation ever for what they endured. Absolutely amazing. Let's just read this. Listen to this imagery. Dead matted the fields of Gettysburg, as thick as a corn crop before harvest. The fallen of World War I were so numerous that many lay exposed for years, white bones glinting through tattered cloth in the noonday sun. During World War II, the frozen dead at Bastogne had to be stacked for later burial. On Okinawa, E.B. Sledge wrote in his diary, quote, every crater was half full of water, and many of them held a marine corpse. The bodies lay pathetically, just as they had been killed, half submerged in muck and water, rusting weapons still in hand. Swarms of big flies hovered above them for several feet around. Every corpse, maggots crawled about in the muck. This is the type of warfare that shaped the commemoration we know as Memorial Day. Nations went to war with millions under arms. Many families lost all their men. Entire generations were lost. And many, too many, sons and husbands were left on the fields where they fell. The day was born in darkness at a time when memories of the killing fields were still fresh. Yet even today, an age in which few of us go to war, the somber, deep, important meaning remains as constant to the land of liberty as the Constitution itself. As I laid out that vivid detail that James Carafano wrote about, just imagine what soldiers, our fallen, had to endure, obviously knowing, many, knowing, if not all of them, thinking, I'm not going to be returning home. I'm not going to see my family again. There was a cause that they were fighting for that was greater than themselves, that cause being freedom. It sounds so cliche-ish, it sounds so simple, but it's so true. I can't imagine. Consider, D-Day, Normandy, rolling up in these boats, just knowing. I'm sure you guys have seen Saving Private Ryan. I remember seeing Saving Private Ryan in the theaters. And I'm telling you, that theater was so somber. It was so quiet. And I looked at all these men as they walked out, many of them older men. Many undoubtedly were World War II vets still alive, just weeping. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house. And it was the feeling was so thick. The somberness was just so thick. These were some of the heroes, I think, still alive, some in the theater. But obviously, they're brothers at arms. They're brothers in arms that passed away. No doubt some of those in the theater were reliving that. And many of us youngins in there that just didn't understand. Tom Hanks did a brilliant job of bringing that into light. But these men, the fallen heroes that have given us the freedoms that we today take for granted. We have to take time to honor them. World War I, World War II, the fallen, Civil War, Vietnam War, North Korean War, all of these wars, all of you, I honor you. I seriously, that is what today is about, honoring the memory of the fallen. Without them, there is no America as it exists today. You can complain all you want. The reason why you have the freedom to complain and talk about how bad America is because of those that have fallen to give you the right to free speech. And how dare some of you on the left work hard to take that away. Unbelievable. All right. Last thing to wrap this thing up. Here's what I want to share. This story you guys might remember. This was huge when Operation, I believe it was Desert Storm. It was called. Did I look it up here? All right. Occurred after 9/11 occurred. People were just volunteering to go and fight and take the fight to terrorists that tried to literally killed 3,000 of our own on our soil. And people signed up like crazy. One of those people One of those people was Pat Tillman. So some of you may or may not be familiar with Pat Tillman. He was an NFL player, young man, good football player, recently signed a contract, I believe, with the Arizona Cardinals. I want to just read you this old Breitbart piece. Many in the world of sports pay tribute to former NFL player and Army Ranger Pat Tillman on the 17th anniversary of his death in Afghanistan. Tillman, who said goodbye to the NFL and at the time a $3.6 million contract to join the U.S. Army after their terror attacks on September 11, 2001, was assigned to Afghanistan in 2004. There, he was tragically killed, unfortunately, on April 22nd during a friendly fire incident. Oh, man. I mean, I remember at the time, it just hearing about the story was just heart-wrenching. And then learning that he died of friendly fire. But that's besides the point. This is who Americans are. Pat Tillman, white guy, right? Football player, gets $3.6 million. It was $6 million in 2000 or 2001 at the time. Young man, early 20s. I mean, his future bright and ahead of him, but yet he understood the importance of fighting for America's freedom. And the reason that he got to participate and play in a game like the NFL football game and get paid well for doing so, he understood that the only reason he could do that is because of the freedoms that we have in the United States of America. And those freedoms were under attack. Regardless of how you may feel about those wars today, these are the men, the fallen, that have given you the opportunity to complain today. So stop complaining, all right? We are blessed, and it's because people like him. So I wanted to wrap up with him, regardless of how you may feel. This is who Americans are. When Americans died in 9/11 in that building that day, they didn't care. He didn't care about the color of their skin. He cared about a larger issue, and so did the fallen. They cared about a larger issue, and that larger issue was freedom. And so we have a duty, we have a responsibility. Those of us that have never served in the military, or perhaps those of us who haven't experienced a fallen loved one that has served in the military, we have a duty to fight for freedom, to fight for this United States in our own way. And that's how we can memorialize and honor the fallen that have gone before us. So I just wanted to take time today. I wanted to honor them, and I will do this annually. I will make sure that on Memorial Day, I take the time out to honor the fallen, because America, the idea, the founders framed it, and they endured much to frame it, to build this great nation. But were it not for the blood of the fallen, America would not be what it is today. Consider this. We're still a young country. When you consider history, China, Asia, when you consider these countries that have been around thousands of years, we're a young country. Look at all that we've endured. Look at all that we've accomplished in the context of world history in such a short period of time. And we can thank our fallen heroes for that. Guys, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Again, I honor those of you families that have lost sons, daughters, perhaps in war. God bless you. God bless you for your sacrifice. I don't say that lightly. I mean it. I will work hard over the years to make sure, to the best of my ability, that our fallen are honored. Please subscribe to my podcast anywhere podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Please go to Rumble. We really want to build up the site on rumble.com. Also, youtube.com, The Carl Jackson Show. You can search for them on YouTube and Rumble. And anywhere podcasts are found, please listen, please subscribe, please share. That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for the time. And again, families of fallen ones, God bless you. We love you. Thank you for your sacrifice. And until next time, Do not grow weary doing good. God bless you all.